everyone. It's your boy, Mike Muse. I am super excited to be in conversation with my next guest.
Let's get down to business with the movie Fear, because I don't know if you've seen it yet, but we had a great reception in New York. I mean, we packed the place. We had so many wonderful stars and influencers there. And this movie, like, I'm really proud of this film. And it's a great message. There's a positive message on top of this scare, and it's fun and it's scary, but it's also positive. So there's a message of hope within there, just like we had and we needed during the pandemic. We kind of captured this. It's kind of a time capsule of how scary that pandemic was and how kind of scary it continues to be, and leave us without a full grasp of understanding of what the heck is actually going on.
Now, most people, like in terms of content creators and where they've kind of decided to make the films, are kind of shied away from the COVID narrative. That why were you guys so interested in leaning into the space of COVID and kind of centering in that space?
Well, I think it was the impetus for the film, and as the impetus, I think there's so much in there, and I think that people try to shy away, just like they did on the influenza of 1918. That it wasn't written about, that wasn't it, but it was documented. And in some ways, because we don't name what this airborne pathogen is in our film, it is not. We didn't hit the nail on the head too hard. We didn't put too fine a point on it. It's kind of like these people are living with what we lived with in a way, and that is the unknowing of the future. That's kind of the media manipulation of the disease, the polarization of not the disease, but the virus rather. Again, even just saying disease, which is a common misnomer of this. It's not that, but it's this. Just like the whatchamacallit, it should have been called the COVID shot, not the COVID vaccine, because a vaccine is actually an eradicator of something. So I think that even calling it a vaccine was kind of a polarizing thing that obviously had an effect on it. But back to your point, is that what we captured was the unknowing and the fear that went along with the pandemic initially. Remember, we shot this. Roxanne Avent and Dion Taylor, our director, they both produced this film, and it's the first film that was ever up with principal photography during COVID, during the lockdown. Okay. There were rules. There were no CDC guidelines that were in place that were like, this is what you should do. So Roxanne and Dion made these up. And then after we were done filming, that's when NBC and Universal, and they were like, how'd you do that? Just curious. Yeah. So Dion and Roxanne deserve so much credit for that. But what we also did was we were in our own bubble, just like the NBA after us, around the same time made the bubble. Don't hang around with anybody. It made us tight and made us a family. And I think that that's reflected on screen, just like the unknowingness of that period of time. And think of the civil unrest, man. George Floyd just had Black Lives Matter marches were happening across the country. It's kind of the first time that we had a full social breakdown within the United States of America, where something could have turned and made everything so much worse. And we were living at that. And when we filmed this movie, so we captured that fear.
It's really interesting. Hearing you talk about this right now, I think about how when films or television shows have leaned into COVID, it's been about just the virus aspect of it and not really so much the human condition. And I think a big underlying human condition was the absolute fear of it. And I remember I got COVID really early on, like the early adapter, if you will, like in March of 2020. And we didn't know when losing taste and smell was a symptom of having COVID. Being here in New York, being a reporter on it, I got up in the morning looking for the death numbers to report out, right? Like looking at the morgue truck. So I had this innate fear inside. I don't think any show has ever captured the actual emotion of the fear behind the virus. I think it's really interesting how you guys are doing that. I'm curious though, as you guys said, you guys were the first principal ones to actually do filming of this. Was there fear amongst the cast and crew about the virus that anyone could have caught it?
That is such a great question. And the answer is yes. Just like you see in the film, when they start distrusting each other, the characters, we didn't know if we could get it. We didn't know if we all had it. There was one point where King Batch, where we were drinking the wine, and then people have an adverse reaction to it. Well, it really hit Batch in the wrong way, and he actually threw his up. Ugh. And one of the camera guys just dropped the camera. And we were like, oh, man, I hope he was okay. Oh, he got freaked out. Well, he got freaked out not in the way that we thought. He got freaked out and said, this is crazy. How do we know we're all not?
What?
Oh yeah. And these are, I mean, I can't even tell you how much these cameras are. I don't know, 50 grand. And it was just like, people were out. Dion had to talk some crew members off the ledge and say, listen, we're all in this together. And he got the person back. But yeah, man, it was real.
That's
In fact,
interesting, man. I've never thought about emotion being like a secondary character. You know, I always look at film as like the city being like a secondary character, or sometimes even a primary character. Sometimes I look at music as being a secondary character, sometimes a primary character. But I never look at emotion as being like a secondary primary character. It's normally the emotion is in the actor's face or their body language. They kind of hold the emotion and maybe vulnerability. But I've never thought about fear as an actual character unto itself. And it's evident by that cameraman. That's kind of mind blowing right now.
absolutely, because 100% of the time, at least in my experience of watching television and film, even theater, I mean, theater's a little bit more interactive where the emotions kind of live among us. It's such a spiritual undertaking. But on film and television, that emotion comes from within. And you're right, it was without us. It was, you know, it was around us. It was among us. That's a beautiful. You're the only person who's ever said that, and I think you are spot on.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's just really interesting hearing you talking about it. As usual, I never write questions down. It's all about just the energy aspect of it. You hit on polarization aspect of it, because that was another part of that COVID dynamic, was the fear and the partisanship aspect of it. Now I'm thinking about the cameraman. Was there a partisan ideology conversation? You don't have to say who, but was that on the set unto itself? Because you know, that became a dynamic on a lot of sets, right? Like who was going to get the shot, who wasn't, who could keep working, who couldn't, right? Like, I'm just curious, did that creep into the dynamic of the shooting?
How early on we were. A shot didn't exist.
Yo, that's right. Oh, y'all were really early on. When you say early on, you literally meant that. That gives the audience, that gives us a marker of really when this was shot.
So there were different camps though. I was a little bit more, just being honest, and I will be transparent on this, that I was a little more liberal, thinking like, hey man, we're all in this together. As long as we use our heads, we don't have to be crazy. And there were other people who were like, you know, I am not taking off this mask outside. Please give me my space. When I was outside, I took my mask off and hung out, you know. And that was before people were like, you know, because we do know now that there is an airborne quality to it. Droplets can infect and be exposed outside in that environment, as long as there's enough people around, blah, blah, blah. And that is true. At the time, I was probably short-sighted in that, but there were different camps, and people in their camps.
Yeah. Just how did you set, like, what made you interested in doing a horror film? Not that I'm an expert on your career, but I believe this was your first horror film that you've actually entered in. And I think
it's my first big one. I've done other horror. It's my first. It's kind of the biggest one I've done. I've done a few before. But
what draws you to this genre?
Well, Deon Taylor. I don't care what genre he's doing, as long as the role is right for me, I'm in. Because my job is also not to have complete control. Although I was a producer on this film, and that was a gift from Deon to integrate me as a producer, which is certainly a route I'm going to continue down that path. But making me not only a producer, an executive producer, you know, helping with the casting and helping with the story, was a real luxury for me. But Deon Taylor's the reason I did this film. He called me up in July, early July, maybe even late June at this time. And he was just like, come on out to, we're going to do a film in Tahoe. What do you think, Big J? And I was like, Deon, that's crazy. How are you going to do this? He's just like, believe in me, believe me. Me and Roxanne are coming up with guidelines. We're getting it, everything confirmed by the unions. And he's like, jump in a car, you know, you can make it out here. And I did. I jumped in a car, you know, grabbed my wife, grabbed my little COVID cat from Bed-Stuy. I didn't drive with a cat, so the cat learned how to be a car cat.
That's amazing.
And we made it out there. And Deon's a real visionary. We didn't have a script. We had an idea. So by the time we got to Tahoe, there was a semblance of a script. There were lines, but Deon also shoots with heart and soul and passion. And I think that when some of the actors who it was their first time were kind of like, and that's where my chance to, my opportunity and really what I needed to do to be a leader was to help guide people and assure people this is how Deon works. Trust him. I trust him. And they saw me jump into the fire and they went, all right, I think I'm going to jump into this fire because look at Joseph isn't getting burned, I won't get burned either. And they did. And that made for a really cohesive cast. He stretched me. It's a way that you don't normally see me. It's a way you normally don't see you don't see T.I. The way you don't normally see Terrence J. Terrence J has never done this role like this before. So Dion did a wonderful job of stretching us out. I also love Idol Goldberg's performance, who I think is brilliant. So wonderful in Peaky Blinders and Snowpiercer. But it's again, it's a different role than that for him. So Dion really stretched us out as actors. And then the cinematography from Chris Duskin was phenomenal. Every frame of the film.
I love the idea that there was no scripts. I love the idea of like authenticity. I love the idea of improv. I love the idea of like feeding energy off of each other, right? I think that really can make it really rich, content and presentation of the film. Before I let you go, Joe, so I don't want to keep you, but I'm just curious about, I've always heard like these moments, I think about horror films like The Exorcist, all the way up to contemporary, like these moments of spirits and energies, like being around. Sometimes like these method actors, it's difficult for them to shake certain characters. Thinking about the Joker with Heath Ledger, right? Like, was any of that around? Was that any a part of your mindset, right? Like, did it make the set sometimes a little bit jumpy and jittery when you're diving into the horror genre?
Yeah, I think that lodge is really haunted. I mean, there's something there. I'm not playing with you, man. There weird stuff did happen there. There were doors, like not necessarily shutting as fast as they did in the movie, but shutting on their own.
No.
I don't if it's like the room that I was in, boom, like water stuff turning on, electrics, all stuff that could be explained by it being an old lodge built in 1858, which is a real lodge, and you can actually stay there if you so choose. Please do. There you go. But so that helped be like, what was that? Like, guys, come on. But there was that kind of fun, what the hell is happening aspect to it. T.I. will back me up on that. And it was great. It was a fun experience, man. But I can't say enough things about Dion Taylor putting this film together. Go see this film. Everybody should go check this film out. It's so much fun. In a world of 3-hour movies, it's an hour and a half. It's a great date night movie. And
I love it.
Man,
but it sounds like, man, I'm really rooting for Hollywood to make movies that are much shorter in time. These 3-hour, 2.5-hour movies, I'm kind of reaching my peak with that one. But I will say, as I let you go, is that I do think there is a new structure of film that is being made, and I think that it was very evident during this award season. The type of movies that are getting awarded didn't have the similar boy meets girl, boy gets girl, boy loses girl kind of formula to it. They all have this really deconstructed way of telling the story. And so listen to Dion's approach of deconstructedness of approaching a script, approaching a cast, approaching how it's shot. I think that is where we're headed towards. And so I'm really excited to see like the makeup and the construct, not only of the script, but of like how that all assembled together now that we know the backstory.
It's a fun, exciting ride, but at the end of the day, it's going to give you something to talk.
I love that. Sikora, thank you so much, man. I'm so proud of you, man. I'm rooting for you. I watch you all the time. Huge fan. Can't wait to have you back, man, in person again at the Mike Muse Show.